The young and the restless spoilers shock in the dim light of a stormy evening. The tension between Traci and Alan had reached its breaking point. The air was thick with betrayal, and every word spoken carried the weight of years of deceit and unspoken truths. Traci, with eyes brimming with both sorrow and anger, launched into a relentless barrage of questions aimed at unmasking the truth behind Alan's sinister actions. "Tell me everything, Alan. How could you do this?" Traci demanded, her voice trembling as much from fury as from the profound hurt deep within her soul. Her heart pounded in her chest as she stared him down, forcing him into a corner where there was no escape from the truth. Alan's normally cold, calculated demeanor began to crack under the pressure of her insistent inquiries. The silence in the room was suffocating until, with a heavy sigh, Alan finally confessed, the confession that would shatter Traci's world. He admitted that he was the one behind the unspeakable crime of kidnapping. Stunned and unable to reconcile the man she thought she knew with the monster he had become, Traci's mind reeled. In a desperate bid for clarity, she demanded, "Give me your phone, Alan. Let me see the evidence. If what you're saying is true, then I need to see it for myself." Her voice was a mixture of hope and despair, a plea for some remnant of the man she had once loved. But Alan's cold eyes met hers, and he refused without a word, a refusal that spoke louder than any explanation could. That simple act of denial sealed the fate of any lingering trust between them. Tears began to stream down Traci's face as the full horror of Alan's actions sank in. The revelation was more than she could bear. It was a betrayal so deep, so vile, that it threatened to consume her entirely. "I can't believe you're the kidnapper," she sobbed, her voice echoing in the silent room. The truth was unbearable, a truth that demanded she sever every bond they had ever shared. In that moment, Traci made a heart-wrenching decision. She wanted to end everything. The ring she had once cherished as a symbol of their love was now nothing more than a painful reminder of the lies and deceit. With trembling fingers, she removed it and placed it on the table, a silent farewell to a dream that was no longer worth living. Before she could escape the suffocating presence of betrayal, Alan took a drastic and chilling step. In an instant, he moved to lock the door behind her, trapping Traci in a claustrophobic prison of fear and regret. The click of the lock was not just a physical barrier but a stark symbol of the control Alan now wielded over her life. Her desperate attempts to break free were met with an unyielding, almost sinister calm from Alan, a calm that hinted at a dark intention lurking beneath the surface. Unbeknownst to Traci in her initial shock, the peril was far from over. Earlier, in a moment of twisted calculation, Alan had already administered a dose of poison into her drink. The poison, slow-acting yet lethal, began its insidious work almost immediately. Traci felt a strange numbness seeping through her veins, a disorienting fog that clouded her thoughts. The realization came too late, as she found herself slipping away into an abyss of darkness. When consciousness eventually returned, it was not to relief or rescue, but to a nightmare far worse. Traci awoke to find herself bound to a chair in a cold, stark room that reeked of betrayal and decay. The once familiar surroundings had transformed into a sinister stage where every detail was crafted to instill fear. Her limbs were constrained by tight ropes, and the room was dimly lit, casting long, threatening shadows on the walls. In the center of this macabre tableau sat Alan, his face a mask of cold determination mixed with a disturbing hint of satisfaction. "Why, Alan?" Traci's voice broke as she cried out, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I didn't do anything to deserve this. Why are you doing this to me?" Her plea was desperate, laden with the anguish of betrayal and the terror of impending doom. Alan's eyes, once filled with a hint of the love she had known, now shone with an implacable darkness, a darkness that revealed his true intentions. It became chillingly clear that Alan was not merely a kidnapper, he was a predator, a man willing to go to extreme lengths to maintain control, even if it meant driving away the only person who had ever truly loved him. The room was silent for a moment, save for the sound of Traci's muffled sobs and the steady, unnerving rhythm of Alan's breathing. His intentions, shrouded in mystery until now, began to unravel in disturbing detail. Was it pure revenge? A twisted sense of justice? Or simply the manifestation of a deranged obsession? The truth was a complex web of conflicting emotions and motivations, each more horrifying than the last. Alan's actions were not those of a simple criminal, they were the culmination of a deeply disturbed mind that had lost all sense of right and wrong. In a final, heart-wrenching moment of vulnerability, Traci begged for forgiveness. "Please, Alan, have mercy on me. I beg you, release me from this nightmare," she pleaded, her voice hoarse from crying in despair. She repeated the sentiment over and over, a mantra of sorrow and regret, unable to understand how love had turned into such a lethal trap. Her pleas fell on deaf ears, echoing in the emptiness of the room as Alan sat silently, the man she once loved now a stranger, consumed by his own demons. The chilling tableau was a stark reminder that sometimes the monsters we fear are not external threats lurking in the shadows, but the people we once held dear. In the twisted dance of love and betrayal, the lines between victim and perpetrator blurred, leaving in their wake only shattered dreams and irrevocable pain. Alan's sinister machinations had not only robbed Traci of her freedom but had also tainted every memory of the life they had once envisioned together. As the minutes ticked by, the atmosphere grew ever more oppressive. The cold, calculated nature of Alan's actions contrasted starkly with the raw, unfiltered emotion that now emanated from Traci, a woman who had been forced to confront the horrifying reality that love, when corrupted by darkness, could lead to unimaginable cruelty. Her story, marked by betrayal, terror, and an agonizing descent into despair, was a poignant reminder of the fragility of trust and the devastating impact of secrets left to fester. In that moment, as Traci lay bound and poisoned, facing the grim specter of death, one thing was painfully clear: Alan's actions were not merely the result of a single lapse in judgment but the product of a deeply rooted pathology. The tragedy of their relationship was sealed not by a single act of cruelty but by the slow, insidious decay of trust and the corrosive nature of secrets that had festered in the dark corners of their shared past. The night was far from over, and as the storm raged outside, it mirrored the turbulent chaos that had overtaken both their lives. Traci's cries, echoing in the cold, unforgiving room, were a testament to a love gone terribly wrong, a love that had devolved into a nightmare from which there seemed to be no escape. And as the final moments of her desperate pleas faded into the silence, one could only wonder what would become of a heart so broken, and whether any semblance of redemption could ever be found amidst the wreckage of shattered trust. In the dim glow of a rainy evening, the tension between Traci and Alan had reached an unbearable climax. What began as a storm of harsh questions had evolved into a labyrinth of secrets, lies, and an unyielding hold on power. Traci, tears streaming down her face, had cornered Alan with a relentless barrage of questions, forcing him to confess a truth that shattered every illusion she held. He was the mastermind behind the series of kidnappings that had haunted her dreams and turned her reality into a nightmare. The confession had come like a punch to the gut, leaving Traci in a state of disbelief and profound sorrow. "How could you?" she had cried, her voice echoing in the barren room where once love had blossomed. In her desperate search for evidence, she demanded Alan surrender his phone so she might verify his words. But Alan, with eyes as cold and calculating as ever, refused without a word. That refusal, though wordless, spoke volumes, confirming for Traci that the man she once trusted was now a monster, capable of unspeakable deeds. Yet, as the storm raged outside, the true horror of Alan's methods began to unveil itself. Unbeknownst to Traci at first, Alan had meticulously concocted a poison, a toxin so potent that it could incapacitate anyone he despised. This poison, his silent weapon, was his secret ace, designed to render his victims helpless before their eyes. And as the substance seeped into Traci's veins, its effects slowly began to manifest, making it painfully clear that escape was no longer a possibility. Traci's life, once filled with hope and vibrant dreams, was now entangled in a web of coerced secrets and deadly promises. The poison worked flawlessly, a testament to Alan's twisted brilliance, ensuring that those who dared stand against him would be silenced, permanently or temporarily, depending on his whims. With each passing moment, it became evident that Traci was not simply a victim of circumstance. she was caught in a relentless spiral where survival depended on one inescapable truth: she had to remain by Alan's side, guarding his secrets with her very life. Despite the overwhelming terror that coursed through her, Traci's inner resolve remained unbroken. Even as she struggled with the crippling effects of the toxin, she made a silent vow to herself. She did not intend to expose the heinous acts that Alan had committed. Not out of acceptance or forgiveness, but because the truth was a double-edged sword. Revealing his dark deeds would not only seal her own fate but might also lead to an even more destructive unraveling of their already fractured lives. In her heart, Traci knew that cutting off the toxic relationship was the only path to reclaiming some semblance of freedom and self-preservation. Yet, the stakes were high, her life depended on her silence. Alan, however, was far from willing to let her go. Driven by a warped sense of entitlement and a desire to cling to the remnants of a love that once defined him, he could not fathom a future without Traci. His mind was riddled with delusions, a distorted mirror reflecting a time when she adored him, when life seemed filled with endless possibilities. "You belong with me," he insisted, his voice cold and unyielding. In a move that chilled her to the core, Alan declared that he would whisk Traci away to Paris, a city renowned for its romance and beauty, where he intended to force her to relive the echoes of their past love. His plan was clear: to trap her in a gilded cage of memories, where the facade of romance would serve as a shroud to mask the horror of her captivity. In Paris, Alan envisioned a life where the city's enchanting streets would be transformed into the backdrop of a twisted reawakening of their former romance. Yet, for Traci, the idea was nothing short of a nightmare. To her, Paris would be the stage for a performance of control and subjugation, a place where her pleas for freedom would be drowned out by the glamour and decadence of the city's allure. Alan's determination to recreate a semblance of their past, however, was an affront to the reality she now faced. Every attempt to reclaim her life was met with the stark reminder that any escape, any act of defiance, would result in consequences far graver than she could ever imagine. Within the cold walls of their confinement, a battle raged, a war waged not with weapons, but with shattered trust and broken dreams. Traci's heart, once full of hope and laughter, now lay heavy with despair. She had no desire to become an accomplice to Alan's sins, nor did she want to be complicit in the dark tapestry he wove with his poison and his secrets. Her intentions were simple: to sever the ties that bound her to a man who had become the architect of her suffering. And yet, the cruel irony was that her very survival depended on keeping his monstrous truths hidden. As the days turned into nights, and the nights bled into a continuous haze of fear and regret, Traci found herself trapped in a grim reality. Every time she contemplated escape, the cold certainty of Alan's poison, and the shadow of his omnipotent control, pulled her back into submission. She longed for a way out, a way to break free without igniting the wrath of the man who had poisoned not only her body but her soul. But every desperate thought was quickly quelled by the overwhelming awareness that defiance might be fatal. In the midst of this internal turmoil, Traci's silent rebellion began to take shape. Her eyes, though clouded by the toxin, burned with a quiet determination. She knew that Alan must be held accountable for his actions, that the scales of justice had to one day tip in favor of the truth. The ring she once wore as a symbol of their love now lay discarded, a remnant of promises broken and dreams turned to ash. She resolved, in the depths of her despair, that if ever she were to find her freedom, Alan would not be allowed to escape the consequences of his deeds. Justice, however distant it seemed, would eventually come for him. Yet, as Alan continued his relentless pursuit to reclaim what he believed was his, he remained blind to the growing strength within Traci. To him, her silent resistance was nothing more than a minor hiccup in his grand design. With cold resolve, he arranged for their departure to Paris, convinced that once under the spell of the City of Light, Traci would succumb to the nostalgic embrace of their former love. His vision was a perverse reimagining of romance, a twisted mirror image of passion and possessiveness where freedom was merely an illusion. In Paris, the contrast between the city's enchanting beauty and the grim reality of Traci's predicament could not have been more stark. The glittering lights and bustling streets became a macabre stage for a relationship that was anything but beautiful. For every cobblestone path that whispered promises of liberation, Traci's heart beat a mournful rhythm of captivity and despair. Alan's obsessive attempts to recreate the past only deepened her resolve to break free, if only she could survive long enough to reclaim her life. As the days passed in a relentless cycle of fear and forced intimacy, the inevitable question loomed large: what would become of Traci? Would she one day muster the strength to defy Alan's twisted plans, or was she doomed to a lifetime of subjugation under the guise of love? The answers lay hidden in the interplay of light and shadow, hope and despair, a constant reminder that the truth, no matter how deeply buried, had a way of clawing its way to the surface. In the end, Traci's struggle was not merely about escaping a man who had poisoned her body and soul. It was about reclaiming her identity in a world where trust had been shattered and love had transformed into a weapon. Her story was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, a journey through darkness in search of redemption and the promise of a new beginning. And as the echo of her silent vows reverberated in the cold corridors of captivity, one thing remained painfully clear: in a world where secrets and poison ruled, only the truth could set her free.